Hello, good evening. My name is Aaron White. I am half Dine Navajo and half Northern Ute from the Ori Reservation. In our language, we introduce ourselves by our clan. So I'll introduce myself, Aaron White and She, Nota and Shle, the Bethlehem and Bashashin. I am Navajo, Northern Ute from my mother, and my father is Dine Navajo from the Four Corners region, Kayenta, Arizona. And I've been a musician all my life. I've been playing music ever since I was like around 4 or 5 years old. I fell in love with music. My family is very musical. I come from two traditions of Ute tradition, Navajo tradition. My grandfather on my Navajo side was a medicine man. My grandfather on my mother's side was a medicine man, also a traveling musician, drummer, traditional singer, Sundance chief. And so music was always in our family. Music was always around, whether it was country, western, jazz, blues, rock, whatever it may be. There was always music around in our home, in our car. Our parents listened to music. We listened to traditional music during ceremonies, during Sundance, or during bear dance on the Ute reservation. Music, traditional music. On the Navajo reservation, Yebiche dances, squaw dances, ceremonial things going on, always music involved. I grew up on and off the reservation. I grew up in Northern California, in San Francisco Bay Area. My parents divorced when I was a little boy. When I was 5, I went to live with my mother on the Ute reservation, and then moved with my father to the San Francisco Bay Area at the age of 8. So there was a big culture shock of living on the reservation and then moving to a big city. I grew up in Oakland, California, in the Bay Area. I grew up in an area called Fruitvale, which is a very gang-infested area. As a young kid, first time I got a knife pulled on me was in the 3rd grade for 50 cents for my lunch money. And I mean, integrated into a culture very fast of multicultural people, Chinese, Japanese, Hispanic, Portuguese, every type of culture. It's like a melting pot, like New York, a melting pot of people. But what I found in that melting pot and that structure of life and everything was music. Music was a thing of escape for me. And music was my refuge. Music was my comfort. I listened to everything I could possibly listen to. If I saw musicians on the street in the downtown area, they were playing jazz, blues, whatever it may be, I would gravitate to it. I'd listen to the radio constantly. I was always playing music, found people. If there was a local band or a band that I could hear practicing in the garage, I would gravitate to it. Music has always been a big part of my life. And I grew up learning a lot of different things, but I didn't come back around to traditional music until I got older, until I got into my 30s. And what pulled me in was, listening to music, traveling around the world. I had a band called Burning Sky. We were together for 13 years. We toured all over the world. We made records for Canyon Records. We played for a lot of big artists, toured with a lot of big artists, opened for some big artists, and we made our mark in the music industry, especially in the Native American music industry, of playing music, of guitar, flute, and percussion, and we explored and pushed the boundaries of traditional, merging it with contemporary music. We started this group back in 1993 when there were very few bands that were still, or in this genre of music. You had your country bands, your rock bands, and things like that. But to fuse this traditional sound of the Native American flute with guitar and percussion, our Carlos Nakai, his group, our group, and maybe a handful of other groups were actually doing this at the time. So we were breaking ground of new sound. We were creating alternate tunings with instruments, guitars, and doing open tunings and things like that. So we were exploring all this different sound of what a very simple instrument could do with only 5 notes, which are based off a pentatonic scale. How many of you here are music majors or can read music or so do you guys know what a pentatonic scale is, right? Anybody? So you have more sharps and minors and flats and majors. You have 5 notes that are based off the pentatonic scale, 2 overblown notes, which would make it 7, which would make it into 2 harmonic notes, which are over. But basically, every type of wind instrument that had been created throughout time, going back to the time of the Egyptians, the Assyrians, 500 BC, going into the Roman Empire, Western civilization music, coming forward to the Anasazi, the Mayans, Aztecs, Incas, the Bahamas, the Pacific Islands, Asia, Southeast Asia, Germany, throughout Ireland, the Celtic cultures, the Norwegian cultures, the Norseman culture, North Africa, Middle East, all indigenous cultures have based their wind instruments off of pentatonic scales. And what I mean by that is that these notations, whether you change 1 or 2 notes in those 5 notes, it still plays in that same genre of music if you understand that. And that's basically what had been sort of a connection between all indigenous cultures, whether there was the first type of instruments were the bone whistles, and then you had river cane instruments that were made from reeds. The Egyptians made multi-chambered instruments that had 2 reeds that were connected together that went out in a V shape. The Romans created a V-shaped type. The Assyrians created a V-shaped type. The Mayans and the Aztecs created multi-chambered instruments which were made out of clay. But yet all of these instruments were based off of pentatonic scales. When ethnomusicologists came through and when the Europeans came over, and around maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a woman who worked with the Smithsonian from 1910 to about 1936, 1938. Her name was Frances Densmore. She's an ethnomusicologist. Her job was to record Native American music around the country. She did thousands and thousands of recordings off of an Edison machine. How many of you know what an Edison machine is? Okay. Okay, we're getting somewhere. So the Edison machine is a hand cranked machine that works off of wax cylinders. So you have a vibration or an electronic connection with copper. So when a person speaks into this funnel and it goes down into this little crest of copper wire, and then it creates a magnetic pulse, and it records vibration and sound and goes onto a wax cylinder, which is only about that big. So you had to crank it while the person was speaking, while they were singing. So this woman, Frances Densmore, made it her specific job from the Smithsonian to travel around the United States with this heavy Edison machine. Those things weighed like 40, 50 pounds. They were heavy. And so she hauled these things around by train, horse, buggy, hiked into places. And she went into places that nobody would ever think of going, just to get a song from maybe a medicine woman, medicine man, someone of prestige from a tribe, or a group of women or men that were singing with drums, rattles, whatever. Native people made sounds which she recorded. She took these recordings back to the Smithsonian and she transcribed this music onto sheet music. So American composers from about the 1920s to the 1940s were able to use these sounds, incorporate some of the orchestrations that they did. There's one piece that was done by a composer from Albuquerque, New Mexico, that created a piece called, a symphonic piece called Kokopelli's Dream. And so all this music that she transcribed, people began to discover. And when she began to transcribe these notes onto sheet music and break them down, she began to think that, well, Native American music is very redundant. It's very repetitive. It's over and over and over. And those of you, that are here in this room who come from traditional backgrounds or have parents or grandparents, or even yourselves that practice your tradition, when we're in a ceremony, we sing same thing over and over and over. There's a rhythm that we get into because it brings us to that state of focus. It brings us to that state of clearing our mind. It brings us to that state of feeling and knowing that what we are doing is beginning to help us along the way. And so when she discovered this, she thought about it, and then she asked a gentleman about it, and he explained to her that simply that the reason why Native American music is the way it is, traditional wise, is because it's like a prayer. That's basically what it is. It's a thing that helps us over and over. It's like meditation. When a Buddhist monk is sitting there rocking back and forth and he's going through his chants, he's bringing himself to his mind. He's bringing clarity. He's clearing out his spirit. He's clearing out his mind, his body, his soul. Everything is being cleared. He's cleansing himself. And that's what we do when we go into a sweat lodge, or we go into a ceremony. We go in for the cleansing, or we go in to help heal somebody, or we help somebody along. And that's part of the beauty of music, the beauty of sound, the beauty of rhythm, the beauty of tone, the beauty of melody. If you really think about it, simply just the simple forms of sound are very important to us as human beings. It's something that touches us in our hearts, in our mind, in our spirit. It carries us. You hear a song on the radio, or if you've ever had an experience where you're in the car and you're thinking of a song, you're sitting there in the car going like this or whatever, and then all of a sudden you turn the radio on, and that song you were thinking of comes on the radio, and you think, oh, wow, how did that happen? It's that connection. So electricity in the air, your brain waves, everything around you, we all have that connection of some sort, that happens around us. And, that's what I learned later on, is being a musician, the connection I have between both traditional music, modern music, and then whatever is in the future that I can create and be creative. So what I want to do right now is I want to play a little piece for you off of one of the older type of instruments that was created by some of our ancestors, the Anasazi. How many different tribes do we have in here right now? Why don't you go ahead and tell me where you're from?
I'm from northern Arizona, southern Utah. I'm Dine.
Okay, yeah, there. Where are you from, sir?
I'm from Michigan, Little River Band of Ottawa Indians.
All right. Nice. Pine Ridge, that's where my stepmother's from, Pine Ridge. If you're related, I need some money. Just kidding, I'm just joking. And where are you from? Yankton Sioux. What tribe? Nice. Dakota Sioux. Nice. So we have all these different nations in here that are being represented right now, and each one of us have that connection, and that's the music, the beauty of music, the beauty of ceremony, the beauty of song, the beauty of dance, everything that we have, that we are connected in that way as Indigenous people. Throughout the world, wind instruments have been a very big part of that connection. When I was talking about the notations of the flutes, I'll give you an example of how one single note can transpire and change what you would think that just the Native American flute would sound like. So we have 5 notes. So if I change that one note, goes into a whole different thing, which is basically the Middle Eastern tones of pentatonic scale, which are Mixolydian scales, Aeolian scales. So you have a lot of differentiation. Well, how do I want to say that? Help me out here. You guys are college students. There you go. I was just testing you. So you have the differentiations of these notes. And so, but yet they're still connected, in wind instruments like this. And so I'm going to play you a little piece on this cane flute, which the Anasazi had, which were very simple to make. And one of the reasons why they made them out of this is because already the material is cylindrical. It's round, it's the circumference of it. They didn't have to carve very much out of it. This is what it looks like in its natural state. It's yellow. It grows in dry riverbeds in northern Arizona, Sedona, Camp Verde, up on the high desert throughout. In our region, Lukachukai is a place that's named after the reeds, which comes down through Sele, which comes into Canyon de Chelly. It's where the reeds grow. And this is where our creation stories were started from. And so the river cane to the Dine people is a very important part of our history and our culture, part of our creation story. How we emerged from the 4 worlds through the darkness, through the water, through the earth, and then into the light, the sun. And so it's part of our ceremony. When we do the ceremonies, which are 4 days, they tell the story over and over about the creation story. The medicine man, has the sand paintings, in the dirt and the different color rocks, and they talk about this And the flute is a big part of that because there were stories, through our culture that says that the insects were part of making the holes. The bird were part of creating the songs. The animals were part of the connection for the dance. All these different things that are part of our ceremony and our creation story. It's a long story. We'd be here for days, trying to tell this story, telling it in the Navajo language is the way it's supposed to be told, not in English. And so, we share these stories during the wintertime when we talk about the creation and we talk about the deities and we talk about all the Yebiches and all the blessings from White Shell Woman to Spider Woman to the twins to, the monster slayers and all these different deities that are around. But a lot of it has to do with the wind instrument. So I want to play a little piece for you on this called River Cane Honor Song. Thank you. I get used to this heat up here in South Dakota. It's been a long time since I've been back up here. The last time I was here was back in 1974, 75. I was my stepmother who raised me. She was from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Her name was Mary Louise Eaglehart, and she married my father, David White, and we grew up out in the Bay Area, and we'd come back here in the summer times. And was a funny thing I was telling one of the people here is there used to be a tour guide at the museum in Hot Springs during the summertime, and so I would go and and the museum back then was was really rough looking. They had all these old artifacts and things like that in there, and I was part of this thing called the Johnson O'Malley program, which was like a summer youth program where, if kids wanted to work during the summer, you either pulled weeds or worked, in an office or you worked at a museum. And so I went to this museum and I thought, do I really want to do this? And so they took me in, there was this little old lady that was in there she was real cranky, and she's like, "Oh, you want a job here? Well, this is what you got to do," And she gave me the whole breakdown of how I was gonna be this tour guide. You're going to show people around. You can go around here and do this. And she gave me very little information, so I had to be creative. And so I kind of got my little spiel together, my little shtick, and I was telling people about different things of what the museum had. They had one part where there was an old, like dental chair and dental tools, which were very primitive looking, and then they had the artifacts for the Native people. And then they had the cowboys and, the business and all this stuff. So I had to learn, I had a quick crash course of how to be a tour guide, at the age of 14. And so, they showed me around, and I went into the basement one day and I saw these buffalo robes, and I saw these buffalo skulls, and I saw all this beadwork and things like that, dresses. And I was in awe, thinking, why aren't these things out there? Why are they stashed away, in the basement of a museum? So it got me to thinking, about the culture. And, when I was talking before, I said, I didn't come around until later on in my life, until I hit my 30s. I began to think about who I am as a Native man, who I am as a human being, and, where the music led me. Because I played everything from rock bands to metal bands, to acoustic solo music and things like that. And then, after all that, I come around and create this music of Native American flute and guitar and percussion. And so, it was an awakening for me, to learn and relearn the history and the culture of our people. And, this may happen to some of you. Maybe, you know enough already, and your language and everything, to know and to carry that tradition on. And if you are blessed to come from a traditional family that teaches you those traditional values, and you're walking in two worlds, you have the upper hand because you speak your language, and then you live in a modern world where you have to make money and you have to work hard, you have to get an education, and you have to say in your mind that you're going to be successful, and you're going to create something, and you're going to go on and be creative, you're going to go on and do great things in your life. And so, that's what happened to me, as a musician. I played all this music. I went to this, gotten awards from music. I got a Grammy nomination, with my band. I've been to a lot of these different places and opened for a lot of different people. But who was I to myself as an individual, as a Native American man living in this modern time? It led me back to a traditional instrument. And that's what this is. It's an instrument of thousands of years of creativity by our people, all walks of life of indigenous life here on this earth, to create songs and to create music, to carry on those ceremonies, carry on that language, the stories, and everything that is slowly being forgotten. And we have to preserve that. And there are people out there that will do that. They'll preserve it. They'll know. They'll pass that knowledge on. And if you learn those things from your family, from your grandfathers, your grandmothers, your moms and dads, your brothers or sisters, relatives, aunties, uncles, whoever you're learning it from, take it all in, write it down, record it, put it on record, because it's something you're going to have to teach somebody else for the future. We are the bridge builders. We bridge that gap between tradition and the modern world. And this is one of the instruments that has helped me make that connection, of carrying on that tradition and that culture. So I want to play this for you. This is a very interesting flute. It's a drone flute. And these drone flutes go back thousands of years also, back to the time of the Mayans, the Aztecs, our Anasazi people in the Southwest, the Sonawa, the Hohokam, the Fremont. Ancient civilizations were creating multi-instruments. When ethnomusicologists were coming through, like I was saying before, they had found cane flutes that were connected together. So they created, different sounds of connecting two pieces of reed together to even go further than playing one instrument at one time. The same way with the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas, they were making multi-chambered instruments out of clay. They were putting little bird whistles in there. And I had a friend who passed away not too long ago. He made replicas of the Mayan or the Aztec death whistles, which was a skull made out of clay. And when he would blow into it, it would just give you like this real eerie feeling. I don't know why he created them, but he recreated them. And so, he made these things, and I went to a couple of his presentations, and then he made these beautiful flutes that were made out of clay with like 2 or 3 flutes in one. And then he made this one at the end. He'd burn his kapal on the end, and he would have a fire going while he was playing his flute. And I thought, wow, one of these days I want to build a flute with fire too. But it was part of these rituals and these ceremonies that these people did. And then when people migrated, they migrated from the north and the south, the east and the west. The instruments traveled with them. They carried them with them. They traded with them. Or if they fought against another people, then they were taken during that time. Or the creativity of the instruments were either made better or they remain the same. The flute has evolved, but yet it's kept its traditional and cultural properties at the same time. And so I want to play this one for you and give you an idea how this sounds. And how these work is there's one side that plays like a standard flute, and then there's one side that's a drone flute, but it also goes 1 octave higher, so you get a higher pitch and then a lower pitch. It's got 2 holes on the end. I play one side, and then I can play both of them together. But I'll give you an idea how these sound. These are really fun to play. Takes a lot of breath. Ooh, yeah, it's like running a mile. I'm just kidding. If I was running a mile, I'd be in better shape. But the instruments itself, the creativity behind them, the creativity behind creating melodies and songs. They always say that musicians, artists, and people that are creative, we think with the left brain, we work with the right brain. We connect in a whole different way. And I strongly believe that because, if I talk to a normal person, the conversation lasts for like a half a minute. But if I talk to a creative person, then we don't just talk. We talk about things of how and why, and you begin to discuss things of the creative process of why you do it this way and why you do it that way. There's no if, ands, or buts, or no excuses about why it can't be made better. You just do it, and you create, and you constantly are thinking of ways. And I think as a musician, that's how it is with whenever I make a flute at home. I sit there and I sometimes will be on my work area, and I'll just look at the wood, and some may call me crazy, but I talk to the wood. I sit there and have like a story that starts coming to me of, okay, I'm going to make you into this. I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to do this with you, and I'm going to sand you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to, and I start having these conversations with the pieces I create. And by the end of the time, it's done. Then I say, well, now it's time for you to go, to the person who is going to have you. And these are just crazy things, probably as artists do, or maybe I'm just crazy and I'm the only one who does it. But it's a process of creating these flutes, and when I choose the wood to do it with, because I only work in two types of woods. I work with walnut and I work with cedar. Cedar, I like using cedar to create my flutes because it gives it a soft, nice, sharp tone. And when I use walnut, it gives it a nice, strong, it has a very resonant sound to it. So those are the only two types of woods, and they're both great that adhere to moisture very well. And you can travel with them, and they won't get all fickle on you or anything, especially when you go to a very humid climate and then you come back to a dry climate. Because sometimes with flutes, if you go to a humid climate, you come back, sometimes your flutes will crack, if you don't take care of them and oil them once in a while, or moisturize them, or put beeswax in the center and the insides before you seal them together. And the old type of flutes that were made, long ago, they would find a straight tree branch. They would split that tree branch in half, and then they would burn the inside with hot embers to help carve it, to make the wood a little softer, or be able to clean it out. And then they would put it back together, and they would use tree sap. Tree sap, you all leaned against a tree and got tree sap on your hands. And tree sap is very strong. It's very, very sticky, and you can use it, and it bonds really well, but it doesn't last for very long. And to me, it's like Mother Nature's glue. And so, long ago, they would take tree sap from the trees, and they would put it inside of maybe a stomach lining of an animal, and then they would heat it up over a fire, and they would liquefy it, and then that's what they would put on the inner sides of the part that was split in half, and they would put it back together after they carved it out, and then they would let it set, and they would wrap strands of hide all the way along the flute so that it would dry. So it was basically the clamps that would hold it together. Then when it would dry, they would take those old strands off, and they would hand carve the flute, whatever they were creating, and then they would put new strands on there because they knew that it wouldn't hold it back together. So if you ever seen those old photographs of old flutes that were made from the 1400s, 1800s, and you wonder, why is there so much fringe on those? It's basically holding the flute together, is what it's doing. That's its whole purpose. Is after a while, the flute comes apart. But now, we got Gorilla Glue, Elmer's glue, and stuff like that. So we don't need all that stuff anymore, or put as much hide. More decorative, basically, is what it would be. But that's how the old traditional style flutes were made, with tree sap or bind it together, using the leather strands and the hide. And so I'm going to play this one for you. This one's a flute that was made out of cedar, and it's a little brighter in between tone. This is tuned to the key of E, and very beautiful sounding flute. And I'll play this one for you. Yes.
What's that little rectangular thing with the?
Oh, okay. Yes, this is the block. So Native American flutes are the only type of flute that has a block on top, and it basically acts as a reed. And so it doesn't really change the tone of the flute, but it just helps channel the airflow through. because when you have like when it's like shakuhachis from Japan don't have the block on top, you'll blow it from the side, and then also cana flutes from South America, Peruvian flutes, they all have where you blow it and you have a little notch where you blow it. So if you ever taken a blade of grass and blew on it, you get a whistle effect. That's basically how it is because when you split the air. So what happens is you have two chambers on each side of the flute. And this has all been fashioned after the river cane flute because when river cane grows, it seals itself off just like bamboo. So nothing gets through, seals itself off, and then it grows again. And that's where the concept came from, is making two chambers in two areas. So there's a hollowed out area here, there's a wall of wood right here that's all the way through. So the air basically hits here, goes up, goes through a little channel that's right here. It's very, very narrow. And so this block suppresses that area. So without it, you have no sound. When you put the block into place, and it's the only type of flutes in the world that have the blocks on top because you can have stronger air going through. If you do it with a cana flute, it gets very wispy. So you can hear a lot of air being forced through. But with the Native American flute, you can force as much air as you want without it really losing its tone. It actually gives it a lot better tone, especially if the flute's made correctly. So that's the reason why you have the block. And it just controls the airflow, doesn't control the tone very much. You can soften it if you move it back a little bit more, but you get more of a windier, wispier sound if you don't. And then you just take your strand of hide, tie it back on, and and the reason why you can have these removed too, because there's a lot of moisture buildup inside, so you can let the air dissipate, and it'll dry back out. Then you can replay it. But sometimes, if you have a good flute that's made by a good flute maker, it holds the moisture really well, especially if it has beeswax placed on the inside. And if it's not sealed on the inside, then it gets moist really quick, and then sooner or later the flute will come apart because of all the moisture. Because your body is pushing out air. That's what's our body temperature, 97.9 or something like that. And so flutes they'll come apart if they're not made well. If a person plays it a lot and doesn't remove the block, then to let the air dry, then it'll eventually crack or something. But I'm going to play you a little piece off of this one. Thank you. Now, how many of you come from traditional backgrounds? So there's quite a few of you that are come from that traditional background. So when you're hearing traditional music, you feel a certain way. You feel alive because you know your history and your culture and your language. And then when you're hearing something new for the first time, using those traditional elements, do you still feel that same connection? It's a yes and a no and a maybe. So that's where we're at in this century as Native people. We're in that area of balancing, finding that balance back and forth, and it's very true in music because sometimes, I'll be in my travels, I'll run across a few people that will say, well, that's not how you're supposed to do it. This is supposed to be due for this and for this. And, you shouldn't do that and you shouldn't do this and this and that, or you shouldn't talk about this or tell this and do this and do that. But in my way of thinking and, talking to traditional people, they say, well, we're like a flower, we're like a plant, we have to grow. We're like a tree. The reason why a tree has branches is because it leads in different ways. But we all are reaching towards the sun, which makes perfect sense, because we always have to grow, musically, traditionally, culturally, and preservation, of these things, passing them on. Again, I always emphasize passing on for generation to generation. Even if it's a slight bit of knowledge, if you know where you come from, you know your language, you know your history, you know your culture, that gives you a sense of pride. It gives you a sense of knowing. It gives you a sense of being. It gives you a sense that you're grounded, you're rooted like a tree. The only way you grow is by feeding it over and over, watering yourself over and over. You continue to do these things. And that's how I feel as a musician. As a musician, I'm always looking for something different, something I can improve on as a player or as a musician, technique, melody, writing, creating. How am I going to make a flute different than the last one? I still hand carve my flutes. I don't work make my flute on a machine or a lathe. I still, hand carve and work with the wood and put myself into what I'm creating, as an artist. How many of you here are artistic, that draw or create with hand? What do you do?
I bead.
You bead?
Drums.
Beadwork? What do you do? What's that? Acrylic? What about on this side? This side just went silent, like, leave me alone. Well, that's the thing. We have gifts. We have things that we are blessed with in our lives. Whether it be music, art, beadwork, creating clothes, words, songs, lectures, speaking. Whatever it is. Our talents. We find those things and we work with them. We work with what we have. And again, as a musician, and this is, that's all I can speak of as a musician, because that's all I've ever known all my life is working with music and sound and tone. There's so many different elements that are involved. Of course, you all know, and you've heard the stories of, we are in the mother's womb, and as an embryo, the first vibration of the heartbeat, the first sound of the heartbeat. Even a deaf person that's born without hearing, or a blind person who can't see, they feel, the vibration, they feel the rhythm, of being in the mother's womb. They feel that sensation of being alive, and we each walk to the rhythm of our own drum. We each walk to the rhythm of our own heartbeat. We each walk through the rhythm of life, that we are out there, in our own journey. We're finding our own path. We're finding our way, and coming back around, right now as a musician. I've been playing music for all my life, but professionally for about 30 years, touring, being on the road, being away from my family, or being able to bring my family on the road with me, and being able to travel and share, it's been a good life. I've been blessed, and it's back to the tradition is what blessed me all these years of being able to create and continue teaching and learning and evolving, as an individual and as a musician. There's always room for growth. There's always room to absorb and take that knowledge and put it somewhere else, within ourselves and our friends and family and, people that accompany us, musicians on the road, things like that. So, I enjoy, sharing, and I hope that you guys, enjoy, you know, what I have to share with you musically. And I don't know how much time do I have left. What's that? Okay, I'm open for questions. Yes, sir.
Were there lyrics to the tunes you were playing, and is somebody actually speaking them as the musician is playing it?
As far as Native American flute,
Yes.
Native American flute is a solo instrument or accompaniment instrument. But as far as lyrics, you can take and break down traditional songs, and you can, sing along melodies with them if you can, but mostly a lot of people don't. Yes.
How long does it take to
It depends on my mood. Now, usually by hand, it'll take me about maybe a week, to do one instrument because I really get into what I'm doing and I want it to be, done right. And so it's probably about a week to do it. Yes. No, I didn't because during this pandemic, this was another thing. During the pandemic, I just stopped making flutes because I didn't want to, be responsible for somebody getting sick or anything. And so I just, kind of just made. If I was to make an instrument, I'd make it for myself. And I'm gonna get back into it because I've been inspired by coming here. So I'm gonna get back to work in my shop because I've had a lot of people that have asked me, and I have a bunch of orders I got to fill now. So if you want, I have a card up here you can take with you at the end. Yes.
So you do it strictly by order then?
Yes.
You don't, like take some to period?
No, I don't mass produce flutes because, like, again, I do them by hand. So, they're one of a kind pieces. And, I do special orders for people, so if they just get a hold of me, I put them on the list. And when I get to it, I'll let the individual know.
And do you have any recordings?
Yes.
CDs
Yeah.
available?
Yeah. Yeah. I brought some with me.
One of the things that really bugs me about Crazy Horse and, the different places in the parks, music is important and what it conveys is important. And why are we listening, having to listen to some 60s or 70s background stuff? We could be listening to beautiful
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, that's why they brought me here today because I played for a few hours upstairs.
Do you harvest your own wood?
What's that?
Do you harvest your own
I have
wood?
different places that I get it from that they do a good job, of good quality, pieces of wood and stuff like that. Yes, ma'am.
Have you a favorite food?
No, I like all of them. They all have their own voice, and I haven't named them. If you're gonna ask me that next, I haven't gone that far. But no, I like the low tones. I like the high tones. It's whatever comes out of them. I just enjoy playing them. Yes, sir.
Is the whole pattern the same for every flute?
No, there are a lot of different tunings. Like Lakota flutes are 5-hole flutes. Some of them are 4-hole flutes. So they're not basically based all off of pentatonic scales. There are traditional tunings that were handed down for people here for generations. So there's a lot of different types of tunings that you have. That it's not basically like all the flutes here are all pentatonic scale based off of 440 scales and everything. So there's a lot. There's so much I didn't even cover. I could do a 2 to 3 hour session and talk about tunings and things like that. So what I touched on today was just the cream on top. Anybody have any question on this side? Saw somebody put their hand up, the person next to him jerked it down. Now, what schools are you guys from? Hot Springs? Oh, so you know that museum I worked at then. So, and what other schools? Lakota Tech? Oh, she's representing with her sweatshirt there. Yes. Okay. Where's that at? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, if anybody else doesn't have any other questions, yes.
What changed at age 30 for you to turn that?
You know, I think it was just, I got tired of playing modern music, you know, in a certain way. And I had heard somebody playing the flute. And in my mind, I wasn't just thinking flute, I was thinking all other instruments. And in my head, I started creating the melodies along with the individual playing. And I thought, this is an idea that I could run with adding guitar and percussion and creating this whole different sound of music. So in my head, you know, it's like my wife says, you know, when I'm sleeping, I'm tapping my feet, you know, or if I'm somewhere, my hands or fingers are moving, you know, and I'm always thinking in the musical frame of mind, you know. And so, you know, it was just something I heard and you know, it was like lightning in a bottle. It just went and just took off from there.
So you just started experimenting. You didn't go study under somebody?
No, no.
Oh.
Yep. So that was it. I mean, I went to school for theory, you know, went to University of Utah for theory, but, you know, I didn't finish because I was busy playing and performing and traveling. So, anybody else have any questions? Yes.
Do you listen to any other Native American artists?
Yeah, I listen to all types of. I support. That's the one thing that I do is support indigenous music. You know, and our industry, as far as indigenous music, is very small. I mean, the Latin industry is huge. You know, the European industry is huge. You know, modern music. You know, all these different genres of music. Native American music is still in its infancy. You know, we have the Native American Music Awards. You know, we you know we're in the Grammy Association for a while for NARIS, and then you know they dropped our category, but we're still able to submit, you know, to different categories like roots, you know, music and stuff like that. But you know, I'm a big advocate and have helped a lot of other artists, you know, in their careers, you know, as far as you know signing them to different labels and stuff like that. So you know, I'm a big advocate and you know, always wanting to help other artists and bring other people up, you know, and you know, create our industry and make it bigger and make it stronger. So yes.
Do you play any other instruments besides the flute?
Yeah, I play guitar. I play a little bit of piano, percussions and stuff like that. Yes.
Have you ever heard of Douglas Spotted Eagle?
Yeah, I know Douglas. Yeah.
My grandparents and father did tours with him.
Yeah. Okay. Who are your grandparents?
Herman Begay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know your grandparents. Yeah, nice. Cool. Yes.
Any key points on living as a bridge between traditional and contemporary worlds?
My main thing is focus. You know, main thing is I always get myself in trouble when I say things, but you know, tradition. You know, it's living healthy. You know, living a good life. You know, keeping your mind clear. You know, your body, your spirit. I mean, we're given one opportunity. Each one of us are given one opportunity in this life. And if we don't take that opportunity and run with it, then what have we really done with the life we've been gifted with? You know, we all come from different backgrounds. Some of us have come from broken homes. Some of us have come from homes that we have everything. You know, some of us come from different walks of life of maybe not having, you know, the money or the love or this or that at home, or no guidance or no, you know, being tutored or taught by somebody. But we have a choice within ourselves of, you know, self. What are we going to do with self? We're going to rise up. You know, we're going to continue on the path, even though it takes maybe a little bit longer to get there. But if we go within ourselves, you know, we can rebuild ourselves, you know, mentally, physically, spiritually. And, you know, no one has control over that. You know, no one can control the directions that we go or how we do it. You know, we are the ones that are always going to be in control of ourselves, you know. And I learned that, you know, the hard way, you know, and I came back around. So, you know, I always say, you know, you can save yourself from yourself. You know, it's the strength, the inner strength that you have to work on and continue, you know, to build. And, you know, bridging those gaps, you know, you are the builder, you know, you are the steward, you are the individual who can bring that all together, you know, and develop your tools or develop your mind, you know, and everything. And, you know, as Native people, you know, we have our prayers, you know, we have our ceremony. If we haven't learned those things, there's always somebody around that will teach you. And sometimes even your own family, you know, can't be the ones that save you. Sometimes it's an individual out there, you know, that's waiting, you know, that you may never ever know. And one day you run into them, they change your life completely. So, you know, it's all up to us individually. And, you know, I hope that kind of touches on what you were asking. So with that, thank you for coming, Shahat and Joniet. You know, walk in beauty, you know, love yourself, go where you want to go, dream big, you know, believe in yourself, and don't let the man bring you down. Shahat, thank you guys very much.